The radio call came in at 2:47 p.m. on July 19th, 2023. Officer Bigay, we have a situation. Tourist vehicle found abandoned at the Devil's Zone boundary. Driver's door open, engine running, personal effects inside. No sign of the occupant. My blood went cold. I knew what that meant. I'd known since I was 8 years old, listening to my grandmother's stories by the fire. Someone had crossed into Chiidi Biyagi, and according to tribal law and my badge, I had to go in after them. My name is Thomas Bigay, Navajo Nation Police, and this is the report I'm not supposed to file. The one about what really lives in the 40 square miles of cursed desert that my people have avoided for generations. Some places don't belong to us anymore. Some territories were never ours to claim. I was 20 minutes away when the call came in, patrolling Route 160 near the Arizona-New Mexico border. The July heat made the asphalt shimmer like water, temperature pushing 107 degrees even with the AC in my patrol unit running full blast. This was my 8th year with the Navajo Nation Police Department, and I knew every mile of the 27,000 square miles of reservation land we patrolled. Except for one area. One zone I'd never entered, never even driven close to unless I had to. Chiidi Biyagi, the Devil's Zone. "Dispatch, this is Unit 7, I said into my radio, my voice steadier than I felt. "Can you confirm the vehicle's exact location?" "Unit 7, vehicle is parked at mile marker 14 on Boundary Road, approximately 50 yards from the northern perimeter markers. White Jeep Grand Cherokee, California plates. Registered too. I heard papers shuffling. Dr. Michael Chen, age 34, residence in San Diego. A tourist, of course. They always were. Any indication of duration? I asked, already knowing the answer would be bad. Negative. Vehicle was discovered by a local rancher about 30 minutes ago. Engine was still warm when he called it in, so we're estimating the abandonment occurred within the last 2 hours. 2 hours. In 107-degree heat, that could be fatal even without what waited in the Devil's Zone. 10-4, dispatch, I'm en route. ETA 15 minutes. I pushed the accelerator down, emergency lights cutting through the desert glare. As I drove, I couldn't stop thinking about my grandmother's words, spoken to me 20 years ago when I was just a kid riding my bike too close to the boundary markers. "Thomas," she'd said, pulling me aside with those weathered hands that had seen 87 years of desert life. "You see those stones? Those piles of rocks with the red paint? Those mark Chiidi Biyagi, the place where the devils live. Our ancestors put those markers there for a reason. Promise me you'll never cross that boundary. Not for money, not for dares, not for anything." "But Grandma," I'd asked with the fearless stupidity of childhood, "what's really in there? Is it dangerous animals?" She'd looked at me with eyes that held more sadness than fear. "Do ya nilti go, Thomas. Don't say their names. Don't speak of what lives there. Speaking gives them power, draws their attention. Just know that some places belong to older things than us. The Devil's Zone is their territory and they protect it." I'd promised her that day, and for 30 years I'd kept that promise. Until today. I pulled up to mile marker 14 at 3:03 p.m. The white Jeep Grand Cherokee sat exactly where dispatch had described. Driver's door hanging open, engine off, but hood still radiating heat. The desert stretched out in all directions, red earth, scrub brush, and in the distance the distinctive rock formations that made this part of the Navajo Nation look like a postcard. Beautiful. Deadly. Ancient. I approached the vehicle carefully, hand near my service weapon even though I had no idea what good a gun would do against what might be out here. The Jeep's interior was pristine. Rental agreement on the dashboard, half-empty water bottle in the cup holder, iPhone, charging cable still plugged into the USB port. On the passenger seat was a professional camera, Canon EOS R5, expensive equipment, a photographer. He'd come here to take pictures of the desert landscape, probably read about the stunning geological formations in some travel blog. They never mentioned the warnings in those blogs, never talked about the boundary markers or the reason no locals ever came here. I checked the back seat and found a backpack. Inside, more camera equipment, a map with several locations circled in red marker, protein bars, and a journal. I flipped it open to the last entry, dated today, July 19th, 2:15 p.m., found the perfect spot for the golden hour shoot. The locals call this area Devil's Zone and have some superstitious warnings about it, but the landscape is absolutely stunning. Rock formations unlike anything I've seen. Planning to hike about a mile in to get the best angles. Should be back before sunset. I looked at my watch, 3:05 p.m. He'd been gone for 50 minutes, hiking into an area where my people had refused to go for generations. I keyed my radio. Dispatch, Unit 7, I've located the vehicle. Confirmed abandonment. Subject appears to have entered Chidi Biyagi on foot, carrying camera equipment. Requesting backup for search and rescue. Static, then. Unit 7, be advised. All available units are responding to a multi-vehicle accident on Route 491. Backup unavailable for at least 90 minutes. 90 minutes. The sun would start setting in 4 hours, and once darkness came to the Devil's Zone. Dispatch requesting permission to proceed with solo search. A long pause. Then a different voice came on, Lieutenant Yazzie, my commanding officer. Officer Begay, you're not seriously considering entering that area alone. Lieutenant, we have a civilian who's been exposed to extreme heat for almost an hour, possibly injured in unfamiliar terrain. Standard procedure requires. Standard procedure doesn't apply to Chai Di Biyagi, and you know it. Yazzie's voice was tight. Thomas, I've been on the force for 23 years. In that time, we've had 6 incidents of people entering that zone. Not one of them came out alive. We found 3 of the bodies, eventually. Sir, I have to try. Another pause. This is unofficial, you understand? Your grandmother would kill me for approving this. You cross that boundary, you're on your own. Radio communication is spotty at best in there. GPS doesn't work reliably. You've got 4 hours of daylight. If you're not back by sunset, we're not coming in after you. Understood, sir. And Thomas? Take the ceremonial items from your truck. Your grandmother gave you those for a reason. The radio clicked off. I walked back to my truck and opened the locked compartment where I kept personal items. Inside was the small leather medicine pouch my grandmother had given me before she passed 3 years ago. I'd never opened it, never looked inside, but I'd always kept it close. Next to it was a leather cord with a small turquoise stone, also from her. I put the cord around my neck and clipped the medicine pouch to my belt, next to my badge and gun. Modern law enforcement and ancient protection, side by side. The boundary markers were 50 yards ahead, 3 piles of stacked stones painted with faded red ochre, arranged in a triangle pattern. Between them, partially buried in the sand, were wooden posts carved with symbols I'd been taught never to touch or disturb. Beyond the markers, the desert looked exactly the same as the desert behind me. Same red earth, same scrub brush, same rock formations. But it felt different. Even from 50 yards away, I could feel the difference. The air seemed heavier, the silence more absolute. No birds called, no insects buzzed, just heat and stillness and something else, a pressure, a watching presence. I approached the center marker and stopped. This was it, the point of no return. Cross this boundary, and I was in territory that didn't belong to humans anymore. I thought about Dr. Chen, a 34-year-old photographer from California who just wanted to take pictures of a pretty landscape. He had no idea what he'd walked into, no concept of the warnings my people had passed down for generations. And now he was in there, alone, as the temperature climbed toward 110 degrees and something ancient stirred in its territory, sensing an intruder. I reached up and touched the turquoise stone at my throat. "Grandma," I whispered in Navajo, "forgive me for breaking my promise." Then I stepped across the boundary. The change was immediate and unmistakable. The temperature dropped, not by much, maybe 5 degrees, but enough to notice. The quality of light shifted, taking on a slightly orange tint even though the sun hadn't moved. And the silence was total, absolute, like stepping into a soundproof room. I pulled out my phone to check GPS, no signal. The screen flickered, showed my location as unknown, then went dark despite having a full battery 5 minutes ago. I tried to restart it, nothing. The phone was dead. My radio crackled. "Begay, read, signal." Static swallowed whatever Lieutenant Yazzie was trying to say. I tried to respond, but the radio just hissed white noise. Communication was gone. I was alone. Following the faint trail marks in the sand, I could see Dr. Chen's footprints leading deeper into the Devil's Zone. They were fresh, sharp-edged, made within the last hour. I followed them, hand on my weapon, eyes scanning constantly. The landscape here was subtly wrong in ways I couldn't quite articulate. The rock formations were the same red sandstone you'd find anywhere in this part of Arizona, but their shapes seemed deliberate, arranged, like someone had placed them in specific patterns for specific purposes. I'd gone maybe half a mile when I saw the first marker. It wasn't one of our boundary stones. This was something else, a small cairn of rocks, each one painted with white symbols that looked like handprints. But not human handprints. The fingers were too long, the palms too narrow. Around the cairn, arranged in a perfect circle, were desert animal bones, rabbit skulls, coyote ribs, the spinal column of something larger, a territorial marker, not put there by my people, by something else. I gave it a wide berth and continued following Chen's trail. The footprints led directly toward a cluster of tall rock formations, what the tour books would call hoodoos, pillars of eroded stone that rose from the desert floor like natural skyscrapers. These particular formations created a kind of canyon, with narrow passages between the pillars. Chen's footprints led directly into the canyon. I stopped at the entrance, every instinct screaming at me to turn back. The passage was narrow, maybe 6 feet wide, with vertical walls of red sandstone rising 50 feet on either side. The sun was directly overhead, but somehow the canyon was shadowed, dim, like something was absorbing the light. "Dr. Chen," I called out. My voice didn't echo. It just died, swallowed by that absolute silence. No response. I entered the canyon, flashlight in my left hand, right hand on my weapon. The temperature dropped another 10 degrees. My breath was visible in the air despite it being July in Arizona. The walls were covered in ancient petroglyphs, figures that looked almost human but with too long limbs and heads shaped wrong. Between the figures were symbols I recognized from my grandmother's stories. Warnings, barriers, protection prayers carved by my ancestors centuries ago. The footprints continued deeper into the canyon. I followed, my boots crunching on sand that felt too soft, too dry, like it hadn't seen water in decades despite the monsoon season. That's when I heard it. Clicking sounds, rhythmic and deliberate, coming from deeper in the canyon. Not rocks falling, not wind. This was purposeful, measured, like someone clicking their tongue against their teeth. Click, 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 pause, click, click, click. A signal, communication, something talking to something else. I froze, listening. The clicking came from ahead, maybe 100 yards deeper into the canyon. Then, from behind me, I heard an answering click. Same rhythm, same pattern. I was surrounded. My hand tightened on my weapon. "Dr. Chen, if you can hear me, respond." Silence. Then, from somewhere above me, on the canyon walls, I heard movement. Not footsteps. More like scrabbling, like something with claws pulling itself along the rock face. I looked up and saw it. It was maybe 20 feet above me, clinging to the vertical canyon wall in a way that should have been physically impossible. In the shadows, I could only make out a silhouette, roughly human-shaped, but wrong in every proportion. The limbs were too long, jointed in places limbs shouldn't joint. The head was turned at an angle that would have snapped a human neck, looking down at me with eyes that reflected my flashlight beam like an animal's. But this wasn't an animal. I'd hunted enough wildlife in my 30 years to know the difference. This was something that looked almost human, wearing something that might have once been human skin, but moved like a predator that had perfected the art of mimicry. Yi Nao Lu Shi. My grandmother's voice echoed in my memory. Du Ya Niltigo. Don't say their names, but I knew what it was, and it knew that I knew. The thing on the wall made a sound, not the clicking from before, but something worse, a laugh, almost human, but with too many harmonics like multiple voices layered together. It was mocking me, amused that I'd been stupid enough to enter its territory. Then it dropped from the wall. It didn't fall, it didn't climb down. It simply released its grip and landed in a crouch 20 feet below with no impact sound, no cloud of dust. Just silent, impossible movement. In the dimness of the canyon, I could see it more clearly now. It stood slowly, unfolding to a height of maybe 7 feet, wearing what looked like rags and animal skins stitched together. But beneath that, I could see skin that was too pale, almost gray, stretched tight over bones that bent in wrong directions. Its face was the worst part. Almost human, almost. Like someone had tried to sculpt a human face from memory but got the proportions slightly off. The eyes were too large, too dark, completely black with no visible whites. The mouth was too wide, stretching nearly ear to ear when it smiled. And it was smiling at me, showing teeth that were too sharp, too numerous. I raised my weapon. Navajo Nation Police, stay back. The thing's head tilted, that impossible neck bend again. Then it spoke. Police. The word came out in Dr. Chen's voice. Perfect English, perfect inflection, like it was playing back a recording. Stay back. Then it repeated the phrase in my voice, my exact tone, my exact rhythm. Stay back. It was learning, mimicking. Testing sounds like a child learning to speak. Behind me, I heard more movement. More of them, entering the canyon from the direction I'd come. The clicking sound started again, surrounding me, coming from all directions. I was cut off, trapped in a narrow canyon with things that shouldn't exist. I should have run, should have fired my weapon, should have done something. But I was frozen, staring at this thing that wore human skin but wasn't human, that spoke with stolen voices. Then I heard something that broke my paralysis. A human scream, Dr. Chen. Somewhere deeper in the canyon, very much alive, very much in danger. The creature in front of me heard it too. Its head snapped toward the sound with predatory focus. Then it looked back at me, and I understood. This was a test. It was giving me a choice. Leave now, retreat back across the boundary, save myself. Or go deeper, toward the screaming, into the heart of the devil's zone where more of them waited. Some places don't belong to us. Some territories were never ours to claim. But Dr. Chen didn't know that. He was an innocent, a tourist who'd made a mistake. I touched the medicine pouch at my belt and the turquoise stone at my throat. "Grandma, I'm sorry." Then I ran toward the screaming, deeper into the canyon, into the heart of darkness where ancient things had lived long before humans walked this desert. Behind me, I heard the creature laugh again. Multiple voices, layered and wrong, echoing off the canyon walls. The hunt had begun. I ran through the canyon with my flashlight beam bouncing wildly off the red sandstone walls, following the sounds of Dr. Chen's screams. Behind me, I could hear them following. Not footsteps, but that scrabbling sound of claws on stone moving along the walls above me, keeping pace effortlessly. The canyon twisted and narrowed, branching off into smaller passages. I had to choose directions based on sound alone, following Chen's voice as it echoed through the stone maze. Every instinct told me this was a trap, that I was being herded, guided deeper into their territory. But what choice did I have? "Dr. Chen!" I shouted. "Keep making noise." "I'm coming to you." His screaming cut off abruptly. The silence that followed was worse than the sound had been. I burst into a wider section of the canyon, almost a natural amphitheater, maybe 40 feet across, with walls rising 100 feet on all sides. Petroglyphs covered every surface here, ancient warnings carved by my ancestors. In the center of the space, illuminated by my flashlight, was Dr. Chen. He was alive but in shock, pressed against the far wall, his expensive camera hanging forgotten around his neck. His face was scratched, bleeding from shallow cuts, his shirt torn. But he was breathing, conscious, staring at something I couldn't see. "Dr. Chen!" I moved toward him, weapon raised, scanning the walls around us. "I'm Navajo Nation Police. I'm here to help you." He didn't respond, just kept staring at the shadows above me, his eyes wide with terror that goes beyond rational fear. This was primal panic, the kind that breaks minds. I grabbed his shoulder, shook him. "Focus on me." "What happened? What did you see?" His mouth worked soundlessly for a moment. Then, in a whisper, They look like people. But they're not. They're not people." "I know. How many did you see?" "I don't... 6? 7? They were following me, clicking at each other, speaking. And then one of them," he swallowed hard. "One of them spoke to me. In my mother's voice. She died 5 years ago, but it spoke to me in her voice, said my name. How could it know her voice? Voice mimicry. My grandmother had mentioned that in her stories. The Yi Nadlushi could steal voices from their victims, replay them like recordings, use them to lure and confuse prey. If they'd taken someone close to Chen before, someone who knew his mother. The clicking sounds started again, echoing from multiple points around the amphitheater. They were surrounding us, taking positions on the walls above. I could see movement in the shadows now, shapes that were almost human, clinging to vertical stone like spiders. "We need to move," I said, pulling Chen to his feet. "Stay close to me. Don't run, don't panic, just follow my lead." "We can't outrun them," Chen said, his voice breaking. "I tried. They're too fast. They move like they're not bound by the same physics as us." He was right. I'd seen how they moved. That impossible wall crawling, that silent landing from height. We couldn't outrun them. We couldn't fight them with bullets. I'd emptied half my magazine at the first one, and it had barely flinched. My hand went to the medicine pouch at my belt. Ancient protection. My grandmother's final gift. "There's another way," I said, though I wasn't sure I believed it. My people have lived alongside these things for generations. We've learned how to survive them. We just need to remember. The clicking intensified, coming faster now, more urgent. They were communicating, coordinating an attack. I counted at least 8 distinct sources of sound, 8 of them surrounding us in this natural kill zone. Then one dropped from the wall directly in front of us. It landed in that same impossible silent crouch, then stood slowly. This one was different from the first I'd seen, wearing what looked like a full deerskin, complete with the head serving as a hood. But the proportions were wrong. The skin hung loosely, like a poorly fitted costume. Beneath it, I could see that same gray, pallid flesh, those 2 long limbs. It tilted its head, studying us. Then it spoke in a young girl's voice, high and sweet. "Daddy? Daddy, where are you?" Chen made a choking sound. That's my daughter. That's Emma's voice. How? It's not real," I said firmly, putting myself between him and the creature. "It's mimicry. Your daughter is safe at home." The creature's mouth stretched into that too wide smile. Then it repeated the phrase, but this time in Chen's voice. "Daddy, where are you?" It was showing us what it could do, demonstrating its hunting strategy, how it lured people deeper into the devil's zone, using the voices of loved ones, creating false hope that turned to horror. More of them dropped from the walls, forming a loose circle around us. 7, 8, 9 of them. Too many. They stood at the edges of my flashlight beam, just visible enough to see their shapes but not their details. All wearing stolen skins, deer, coyote, something that might have been human once. All watching us with those completely black eyes that reflected no light. The one in front raised a hand, too many fingers, joints bending wrong, and pointed at Chen, then at me. Then it drew its finger across its throat in a gesture that needed no translation. "Officer Begay," Chen whispered. "What do we do?" I reached into the medicine pouch, my fingers finding smooth stones, dried herbs, something that felt like bone. My grandmother had never told me exactly what was inside, just that it was protection, that I should trust the old ways if I ever needed them. I pulled out a handful of the contents, cornmeal mixed with crushed turquoise, sage, and something else I couldn't identify. Following instinct more than knowledge, I scattered it in a circle around Chen and myself, speaking the only protection prayer I remembered from childhood. The words came haltingly, my Navajo rusty from years of speaking English on the job. "Hojo oji nasha," I walk in beauty, ta sho'odi, through protection. The creatures reacted immediately, not with fear, but with something else, respect, recognition. They didn't retreat, but they stopped advancing. The clicking sounds changed rhythm, becoming slower, more uncertain. The one in front tilted its head again, studying the circle I'd made. Then it spoke, and this time the voice was ancient, layered with harmonics that hurt to hear, speaking in Navajo that was older than any dialect still spoken. "You know the old words. You carry the old protections. Why do you enter our land?" It could speak. Really speak, not just mimic. This changed everything. "I'm here for him," I said, gesturing to Chen. "He didn't know this was your territory." He meant no disrespect. "Let us leave and we won't return." The creature made that horrible layered laugh. "You think you can leave? You think the boundary works both ways? You can enter the devil's zone, human, but you cannot leave unless we allow it." My blood went cold. The boundary markers only kept people out. They didn't guarantee safe exit. "What do you want?" I asked, though I feared I knew the answer. "This land is ours. has been ours since before your ancestors walked on two legs. We let your people mark boundaries, let you believe you had power to keep us contained. But we were never prisoners. We are guardians, protectors of something your kind should never find. Protectors of what? The creature pointed with that too long finger toward a passage at the far end of the amphitheater, a crack in the stone barely wide enough for a person to squeeze through. You entered our territory. You invoked the old protections, so you must be shown. You must understand why this place is forbidden. We just want to leave, Chen said, his voice shaking. Please, I have a daughter, I have a family. Then you should not have come here. The creature's head swiveled to face Chen with that impossible neck rotation. The curious ones always come. With cameras, with maps, with disrespect. You see our sacred places and call them geological formations. You photograph our warnings and post them on your internet for entertainment. You take and take and take and give nothing back. There was anger in that layered voice. Not animal rage, but something more terrible. The cold fury of an ancient intelligence that had watched humans encroach, disrespect, violate sacred boundaries for generations. I'm sorry, Chen whispered. I didn't know. I'll leave. I'll never come back. I'll tell everyone to stay away. You will do all of that, the creature agreed. But first, you will see. You will understand. Then you will carry that understanding back to your people, and maybe, some of them will finally listen to the warnings. The circle of creatures parted, creating a clear path to that narrow passage. An invitation, or a command. I looked at the passage, then at the creatures surrounding us. And if we refuse, then we will add your skins to our collection, and your voices to our songs. And next month, when the curiosity seekers come looking for you, we will use your voices to lure them deeper. The circle continues. Chen grabbed my arm. Officer Bigay, what are they talking about? What's in there? I didn't know. My grandmother's stories had never gone this far. She'd told me to never enter the devil's zone, but she'd never explained what it was protecting, what these things guarded so fiercely. But we had no choice. The protection circle I'd made was already starting to fade as wind blew the cornmeal away. My grandmother's medicine could buy us time, earn us respect, but it couldn't fight 9 of these things. We go forward, I said. We see what they want us to see, and then we leave, and we make sure everyone knows why this place is forbidden. I helped Chen to his feet, and together we walked toward the narrow passage. The creatures watched us go, that terrible clicking sound following us like mocking laughter. As we entered the crack in the stone, I heard the lead creature speak one last time, in a voice that might have been my grandmother's, though that was impossible. Some truths are meant to be witnessed, Thomas, even when they break you. The passage was barely wide enough for our shoulders, forcing us to turn sideways and shuffle through. The stone walls pressed in from both sides, rough sandstone scraping our skin. My flashlight beam could only illuminate a few feet ahead, showing more narrow passage that seemed to go on forever. This is insane, Chen muttered behind me. We're going to die in here. We're going to... Keep breathing, I interrupted. Focus on following me, one step at a time. The passage twisted and turned, sometimes descending, sometimes climbing over rock falls. I lost all sense of direction. Couldn't tell if we were going deeper into the devil's zone or somehow circling back toward the boundary. The temperature dropped further, had to be in the 60s now, impossible for July in Arizona. Then the passage opened up. We emerged into a massive underground cavern, so large my flashlight beam couldn't reach the far walls. The ceiling disappeared into darkness above us, but there was light. A faint green phosphorescence coming from the walls themselves, some kind of bioluminescent lichen or mineral deposit that painted everything in an eerie glow. And in that green light, I saw what the creatures had been guarding. The cavern floor was covered in artifacts, not natural formations. These were clearly made, clearly intentional. Stone structures that looked like buildings but with architecture that followed no human pattern. Symbols carved into every surface, glowing with that same green light. And everywhere scattered among the structures were bones. Not animal bones. Human bones. Thousands of them. "Oh, God," Chen breathed. "What is this place?" I moved closer to one of the structures, my flashlight revealing more details. The architecture was ancient, not Navajo, not any of the Puebloan cultures I knew. This was older. Much older. The symbols carved into the stone included some I recognized from the petroglyphs outside, but also others that looked like no written language I'd ever seen. And among the bones, I found objects, stone tools, pottery shards, weapons made from materials that shouldn't exist, blades that looked like obsidian but were too light, too flexible. Whatever culture had built this place had technology that shouldn't be possible for the time period. "Officer Begay," Chen called from across the cavern. "You need to see this." I found him standing in front of a massive stone wall covered in carvings. As I approached, my flashlight revealed what he'd found. A pictographic history, telling a story in images that spanned the entire wall. The first images showed humans, anatomically modern, wearing clothes, using tools, living in villages, farming, hunting, normal, pre-Columbian Native American life. Then the images changed. Something came from below, from beneath the earth. Creatures that walked upright but weren't human. The pictographs showed them attacking villages, taking people, wearing their skins. But the next images were more disturbing. They showed humans and these creatures coexisting, trading. The creatures brought gifts from underground, metals, stones, knowledge. The humans provided food, shelter, tribute, an alliance, or maybe slavery. The later images showed conflict. Humans trying to seal the underground passages, trying to trap the creatures below. Massive battles, thousands dead. And then the final images. Boundaries being established, markers being placed, an agreement reached. This is a treaty, I realized. The boundary markers aren't just warnings. They're terms of an agreement. Our ancestors made a deal with these things. They stay in their territory, we stay in ours. But what are they? Chen asked. What are these creatures? I thought about my grandmother's stories about the Yi Nallushi. I'd always assumed they were evil spirits, demons from folklore. But looking at this history, I understood differently. They're not monsters, I said slowly. They're the original inhabitants. They were here before humans came to this land. When our ancestors arrived, they were already here, living underground, coming up to hunt. And our ancestors made a deal. Stay out of their hunting grounds, mark boundaries, give them space. In exchange, they'd leave our villages alone. But that's... Chen struggled with the implications. That's insane. You're saying there's a whole other species living under the ground, and the Navajo Nation has been hiding it. Not hiding. Respecting. Maintaining a treaty that's kept both our peoples alive for thousands of years. I turned to face him. This is why the Devil's Zone exists. This is why we have those warnings. It's not superstition, Chen. It's diplomacy with something older than any government on Earth. A voice echoed through the cavern. That same layered, ancient voice. Now you understand. The creatures emerged from passages around the cavern, moving silently despite their size. 9 of them, plus more behind. Dozens, maybe hundreds, living in this underground complex. The lead one approached us, and in the green light I could see its features more clearly. The gray skin wasn't diseased or dead. It was adapted for underground life, like a deep-sea creature's flesh. The eyes weren't black from evil, but from evolution and darkness. The two long limbs made sense for climbing through narrow passages. The voice mimicry was how a predator species adapted to hunt in the dark. They weren't demons. They were people. A different kind of people, but people nonetheless. Your ancestors understood this, the creature said, gesturing to the pictographic history. They saw us as we are, made peace, established boundaries. But each generation of humans forgets. They see the warnings and think superstition. They cross the boundary thinking adventure. And we must remind them again and again why the agreement exists. By killing them, I asked. By protecting our territory. By maintaining the boundary. Would you let strangers walk through your home, taking photographs, treating your sacred places as curiosities? Its head tilted. We show mercy to those who show respect. The rest become lessons. Chen was staring at the bones covering the cavern floor. All these people. All crossed the boundary without permission. All ignored the warnings. All treated our land as theirs to explore and exploit. The creature moved closer to Chen. But you will leave. You will tell your people what you saw. You will honor the agreement your ancestors made. I will, Chen said quickly. I swear, I'll tell everyone. I'll make sure they understand. And you, Thomas Begay. The creature turned those dark eyes to me. You broke your promise to your grandmother. You crossed the boundary, but you did so to honor your duty, to save a life. That intention matters. You may leave, but you carry a responsibility now. What responsibility? To maintain the treaty. To keep your people out of our land. To ensure the boundaries remain respected. It gestured to the cavern around us. We do not want war. We do not want more bones on our floor. But we will protect what is ours. Will you help us keep the peace? I thought about my badge, about my duty to protect and serve. But I also thought about this history, about the truth behind the legends, about the fact that we weren't alone on this land, had never been alone, and the peace between our peoples depended on mutual respect and maintained boundaries. I will, I said. I'll make sure people understand. The Devil's Zone remains forbidden. The agreement stands. The creature nodded, a very human gesture. Then, go. Before the sun sets and the night shift comes up, they are less understanding than we are. It gestured to a different passage, one that sloped upward. This leads back to your boundary. Follow it. Do not stop. Do not look back. And when you cross into your land again, seal your medicine pouch and do not speak of what you saw here until you are far from this place. Names have power. Speaking them draws attention. We didn't need to be told twice. Chen and I ran for the passage, scrambling up the sloping stone, leaving the cavern of bones and ancient truths behind us. Behind us, I heard the creatures begin to chant, a low, rhythmic sound that resonated through the stone, not threatening, almost respectful, like a farewell ceremony. We ran through passages that seemed shorter than they should be, that twisted less than I remembered. Magic, maybe, or just mercy, letting us leave quickly before something changed, before the night shift came. The passage opened up, and suddenly we were back in the canyon, the same amphitheater where we'd been surrounded. But now it was empty, just red stone and ancient petroglyphs. And ahead I could see the narrow canyon leading back toward the boundary markers. The sun was setting, painting the sky orange and red. We'd been in there for hours, though it had felt like less. Time moved differently in the Devil's Zone. We ran, not talking, just running. Through the canyon, past the bone cairns, following the trail back to the boundary markers. My legs burned, my lungs screamed, but I didn't stop. Neither did Chen. The boundary markers appeared ahead, those 3 stone piles with red ochre paint. Freedom, safety. The world where physics worked normally and creatures didn't wear stolen skins. We burst through the boundary and collapsed on the other side, gasping for breath in the normal desert heat that now felt welcoming after the cold of the Devil's Zone. My patrol truck was where I'd left it. Chen's rental jeep still sat with its door open. The sun was setting, casting long shadows. My radio crackled to life. "Unit 7, this is dispatch." "Do you copy?" I grabbed it with shaking hands. "Dispatch, Unit 7, I copy. Civilian located and recovered. We're safe. We're out." 10-4, Unit 7, medical and backup are en route. Are you injured? I looked at Chen, who was sitting on the ground staring at his hands, his camera forgotten around his neck. Physically, we were scratched, dehydrated, exhausted. But mentally? Spiritually? "Negative, dispatch. We're not injured, but I'm going to need to speak with Lieutenant Yazzie immediately. And..." I paused, choosing my words carefully. "And we're going to need to update our boundary protocols." Behind us, as the sun dipped below the horizon, I heard one last sound from beyond the markers, that clicking communication echoing in the gathering dark. They were still there, still watching, still waiting for the next person to cross the boundary and need to be taught the lesson. Some territories don't belong to us. Some agreements must be honored. And some truths are too dangerous to speak aloud. The Devil's Zone remained forbidden. And now I understood why. The backup units arrived 20 minutes after we crossed the boundary. 3 patrol vehicles, an ambulance, and Lieutenant Yazzie in his personal truck. I'd never been so glad to see headlights cutting through the desert darkness. The paramedics descended on us immediately, checking vitals, treating our cuts and scratches, asking the standard questions about confusion, disorientation, heat exhaustion. Dr. Chen answered in monosyllables, still in shock, staring at nothing. I gave them enough information to satisfy protocol without revealing anything about what we'd actually seen. Lieutenant Yazzie pulled me aside while the medics worked on Chen. He was a big man, 60 years old, with silver hair and a face that had seen every kind of trouble that could happen on the reservation. But I'd never seen him look worried. Until now. "Thomas," he said quietly, "what happened in there?" I opened my mouth, then closed it. Where would I even start? How could I explain underground caverns full of bones, creatures that wore stolen skins, treaties carved in stone that predated the United States by millennia? "We found Dr. Chen," I said finally. "We encountered them, the ones my grandmother warned me about." Yazzie's face went still. "Ye naud Lushi?" I nodded. "And more. Much more. Lieutenant, we need to talk, but not here, not near the boundary." He understood immediately. "Your grandmother was right about names having power? Everything she said was right. The warnings, the boundaries, all of it. And we need to make sure people understand this isn't superstition. Come by the station tomorrow morning, early. We'll talk." He glanced at the boundary markers, then back at me. "I'm glad you made it out, Thomas. Not everyone does." The ambulance took Chen to the hospital in Tuba City for observation. I followed in my patrol truck, my hand still shaking on the wheel. Every time I glanced in the rearview mirror, I half expected to see something clinging to the back of my vehicle, following me home. But the night remained normal. Stars overhead, cool desert air, distant lights of houses and towns. The regular world where physics worked and creatures stayed in their proper forms. At the hospital, I stayed while they examined Chen. He'd be fine physically, dehydrated, minor cuts, mild sunburn. But his eyes had that 1,000-yard stare I'd seen in combat veterans, people who'd witnessed something that fundamentally changed their understanding of reality. While he was in examination, his phone began buzzing with messages. Cell service was back now that we were far from the devil's zone. I watched as notification after notification appeared on his screen, texts from his wife, worried emails, missed calls from his daughter Emma, the same daughter whose voice the creature had stolen and used against him. When they finally released him with instructions for rest and hydration, I drove him to a motel in Kayenta. He sat in the passenger seat, silent, clutching his camera like a lifeline. "Dr. Chen," I said as I pulled into the motel parking lot, "I need to know. Are you going to tell people what you saw?" He was quiet for a long moment, then, "Would anyone believe me?" "No. They'd call you crazy, suffering from heat stroke, hallucinating. The photos on your camera won't show anything. Electronic devices don't work properly near the boundary. Trust me." "I already checked," he said softly. "Every photo I took in there is corrupted. Just static and distortion, like something didn't want to be recorded. They didn't. And honestly, that's better for everyone." He turned to look at me and I saw tears in his eyes. "How do you live with this? Knowing what's out there? Knowing that just a few miles from normal civilization, there's something that shouldn't exist? The same way my people have lived with it for generations. We respect the boundaries. We pass down the warnings. We maintain the treaty." I met his eyes. "The question is, can you do the same?" "I have a daughter," he said. "She's 7 years old. She wants to grow up to be a wildlife photographer like her dad. And now I know that if she ever comes to this part of Arizona, if she ever sees those boundary markers and thinks, 'I wonder what's past there.'" He couldn't finish the sentence. "Then you tell her," I said firmly. "Not the details. Those are too much for a child. But you tell her that some places are forbidden for good reasons. That indigenous warnings aren't superstition. That when native people say don't go there, they mean it literally and seriously." He nodded slowly. "I'll tell her. I'll make sure she understands." He opened the door, then paused. "Officer Begay, thank you for coming in after me. I know you broke a promise to your grandmother to do it." "She would have understood," I said, hoping it was true. Protecting people was always more important to her than following rules. He got out, and I watched him walk into the motel, a man forever changed by what he'd seen. He'd keep the secret. I was sure of that. The fear in his eyes guaranteed it. I drove home as the night deepened, the roads empty of everything but distant headlights and the occasional jackrabbit in my high beams. My grandmother's house was on the eastern edge of the reservation, a small adobe structure she'd lived in for 60 years before passing. I'd inherited it, couldn't bring myself to sell it or change anything. It still smelled like her, sage and coffee and the cedar firewood she'd always used. I sat in her old chair, the leather worn smooth by decades of use, and pulled out my phone. Against Lieutenant Yazzi's advice, I started researching. If what I'd seen was real, if there was truly an underground civilization living beneath the Navajo Nation, there had to be some record, some documentation. I found it in unexpected places. Old mining reports from the 1920s mentioned unusual geological formations and unexplained passages that were subsequently sealed. A government survey from 1957 noted anomalous thermal readings beneath certain areas of the reservation. A USGS report from 1983 mentioned echo patterns inconsistent with known cave structures beneath the area now marked as the Devil's Zone. Someone knew. Multiple someones over multiple decades. But the information had been buried, classified, dismissed as anomalies. Then I found something that made my blood run cold. A newspaper article from 1956 archived in the Navajo Times. The headline read, "Tribal Council reaffirms traditional boundaries following survey controversy." I read the article 3 times. Between the diplomatic language and careful wording, the story was clear. The U.S. government had wanted to survey the area now known as the Devil's Zone for possible mineral deposits. The Tribal Council had refused, citing sacred ground and traditional boundaries. There had been protests, negotiations, threats. And then, mysteriously, the government had backed down. The survey was canceled. The land was designated as culturally sensitive and removed from any future development plans. What had the government surveyors found? What had they seen that made them agree so quickly to leave that land alone? I thought about those bones in the cavern. Thousands of them. Not all of them looked ancient. Some had been wearing synthetic fabrics, modern shoes. Recent additions to the collection. How many government workers had crossed that boundary in 1956? How many had never come back? How many bodies had it taken for the message to be received? Leave this land alone or face consequences? My phone buzzed. A text from Lieutenant Yazzie. My office, 7 a.m. Bring your grandmother's medicine pouch. I spent what was left of the night not sleeping, just sitting in my grandmother's chair, holding her medicine pouch and thinking about treaties and boundaries and the thin line between civilization and something older. I arrived at the station at 6:45 a.m., the sun just beginning to paint the desert sky orange. Lieutenant Yazzie was already there, along with 2 people I didn't expect. Captain Sarah Nez, the highest-ranking officer in our department, and a white-haired Navajo man I recognized from tribal council meetings, Harrison Begay, no relation to me, one of the traditional elders who advised on cultural matters. They were waiting in the conference room, a pot of coffee already brewing. The atmosphere was serious, almost ceremonial. "Officer Begay," Captain Nez said, gesturing to a chair. "Please sit. We need to hear everything that happened yesterday." I sat, suddenly nervous. "Ma'am, before I begin, I need to know, is this going in my official report?" Elder Harrison spoke, his voice carrying the weight of 80 years. "There will be 2 reports, Thomas. One for official records, which will say you recovered a lost civilian who suffered from heat exhaustion and dehydration. That report will be filed with federal authorities and made public." "And the second report?" I asked. "Will be for us," Captain Nez said. "For the Navajo Nation leadership. For the record we keep of interactions with the others. The ones who were here first." I looked at Lieutenant Yazzie. "You knew. All along, you knew what was in there." "I suspected," he admitted. "My grandfather was one of the officers who responded to an incident in 1973. 3 college students crossed the boundary on a dare. Only one came back, and he never spoke again. Just stared at nothing until he died 6 months later. My grandfather told me stories before he passed, made me promise to keep people out of that area." "How many people know?" I asked. Elder Harrison answered, "In the tribal leadership, maybe 30. Among the traditional families, hundreds. We've been maintaining this secret for generations, Thomas. Not because we enjoy lying, but because some truths are too dangerous to speak openly. The creatures, they told me about a treaty. An agreement between our ancestors and them." The elder nodded slowly. "Yes, the first treaty. made when our people arrived in this land over 1,000 years ago. We found them already here, living underground, hunting on the surface. There was conflict at first, many deaths, but eventually we learned to coexist. They stayed in their territories, we stayed in ours. The boundary markers were part of that agreement. But people keep crossing, I said. Yes, because each generation forgets. The warnings become legends, then myths, then curiosities. People stop believing. He leaned forward. That's why we need detailed testimony from people like you, Thomas. People who've crossed the boundary and returned. Your testimony will be added to the secret record, the true history we keep. And Dr. Chen will give his testimony, then be quietly paid to leave Arizona and never return, Captain Nez said. It's happened before. We have a discretionary fund for exactly these situations. I thought about that. How many people over the years had crossed the boundary, survived, been paid to forget and relocate? How much money had the Navajo Nation spent maintaining this secret? What happens if the secret gets out? I asked. If someone goes public? Lieutenant Yazzie and Captain Nez exchanged a look. Finally, Yazzie spoke. It's happened 3 times since I've been on the force. In 1991, a backpacker wrote a blog post about desert demons he'd seen. Made it sound like a creative fiction piece. Got some attention online. He disappeared 6 months later. They found his car abandoned at the boundary markers. Jesus, I breathed. In 2004, a documentary filmmaker wanted to investigate Native American cryptids. We denied his permit requests, but he came anyway. His body was found a week later, 50 yards past the boundary. Cause of death listed as exposure, but Yazzie trailed off. And in 2016, a YouTuber with 2 million followers announced he was going to expose the truth about the Devil's Zone. Posted updates all the way until he crossed the boundary. Then nothing, radio silence. We found his camera 3 months later. Footage completely corrupted. No body. He's still listed as missing. Elder Harrison's voice was sad. They protect their territory, Thomas. They protect the agreement. When someone threatens to expose them, to bring massive attention to the boundary, they act. It's not malice. It's survival. If thousands of people came looking for them, if the government decided to investigate seriously, if they were treated as a threat to be eliminated. He shook his head. The treaty would be broken. War would come again. I absorbed this information, understanding the impossible position everyone was in. Keep the secret, and people occasionally die. Reveal the truth, and the consequences could be catastrophic for both peoples. What do you need from me? I asked. Captain Nez pushed a digital recorder across the table. Tell us everything. Every detail. What you saw, what they said, what you learned. This will be transcribed and added to the protected archive. Your grandmother's testimony is in there too, from an incident in 1967. Your testimony will join hers. So I told them. Everything. The canyon, the creatures, the clicking communication, the voice mimicry, the underground cavern with its bones and ancient architecture, the pictographic history showing the original treaty, the creature that spoke in my grandmother's voice and showed me the truth. They listened without interruption, occasionally making notes. When I finished, the room was silent. Finally, Elder Harrison spoke. You were honored, Thomas. Not many humans have been taken to the treaty chamber and allowed to return. They showed you because they judged you worthy of the truth. That's significant. It didn't feel like an honor, I admitted. It felt like a warning. It was both, the elder said. Honor and warning together. They're saying, "We see you, Thomas Begay. We know you now. You understand the stakes. Will you help us maintain the peace?" "I will," I said. "But I need resources. Better signage. Maybe cameras near the boundary to catch people before they cross. Education programs that don't reveal the full truth, but emphasize the real danger." Captain Nez nodded. "I can work with that. We'll increase patrols in the area, improve our response time. And Thomas?" She fixed me with a serious look. "You're now the Navajo Nation Police Department's official liaison for Devil's Zone incidents. Any future crossings, any suspicious activity in that area, you're the first responder." "Why me?" "Because you've been inside and came out," Lieutenant Yazzie said. "Because they spoke to you, showed you the truth. That makes you valuable. And frankly, you're one of the few officers who truly understands what we're protecting people from." Elder Harrison reached into his bag and pulled out something wrapped in red cloth. He unwrapped it slowly, revealing a leather pouch similar to my grandmother's medicine pouch but larger. "Your grandmother made this before she died," he said. "She told me to give it to you if you ever cross the boundary. She knew you would, eventually. The calling runs in your blood. Your great-great-grandfather was a treaty keeper, too." I took the pouch, feeling its weight. "What's inside?" "Stronger protections than what you carried yesterday. Herbs blessed by our medicine people, stones from sacred sites, prayers written on paper made from yucca fiber. If you're going to be our liaison, you need proper protection." He looked me in the eyes. "This doesn't make you invincible, Thomas. But it will earn you respect from the others. They'll recognize the medicine, know you carry our people's authority." I tied the pouch to my belt next to my badge and gun. 2 kinds of authority, 2 kinds of protection. "There's one more thing," Captain Nez said, pulling out a folder. "Dr. Chen signed this an hour ago. It's a comprehensive non-disclosure agreement along with a payment of $50,000 from our discretionary fund. He's agreed to never return to Arizona and never speak publicly about what happened. He leaves tomorrow morning." "You worked fast," I said. "We've had practice. This is the 14th incident in the last 10 years alone. People keep coming, keep ignoring the warnings." She closed the folder. "That's why your work is so important, Thomas. Every person we stop before they cross is a life saved. Every tourist we turn back is a potential crisis averted." The meeting ended, but Elder Harrison asked me to stay for a moment. When we were alone, he said quietly, "Your grandmother would be proud of you. Breaking the promise to save a life, that's what she would have done too." "She told me the creatures used her voice," I said. "How did they know what she sounded like?" The elder was quiet for a moment. "Then your grandmother crossed the boundary once, Thomas. In 1967, to rescue a little girl who'd wandered in. She never told you because she made you promise never to go, and she didn't want to seem like a hypocrite. But the creatures remember. They keep the voices of everyone who crosses. It's how they learn, how they adapt." He paused. "Your voice is in their collection now, too. Future intruders might hear you calling to them, using your voice to lure them deeper. That's the price of crossing." I touched the turquoise stone at my throat, the one my grandmother had given me. "She knew I'd have to go in someday. She did, and she spent her last years preparing you, even if you didn't realize it. The medicine pouch, the protection prayers, the stories she told. All of it was training, Thomas, making sure that when you crossed, you'd come back. Did she come back changed? Everyone who crosses does. You see something that breaks your understanding of the world, but you also see proof that there's more to this life than what science and government tell us. There's older truth, older power. He stood slowly, his old bones creaking. Use that knowledge wisely. Protect both peoples, ours and theirs. That's what it means to be a treaty keeper. Over the next few days, I threw myself into my new role. I worked with the Tribal Planning Department to improve signage around the Devil's Zone. Not scary warnings, those attracted the wrong kind of attention, but official-looking notices about culturally sensitive area, no trespassing, violators subject to prosecution. I coordinated with park rangers and tourism offices to create educational materials that emphasized respect for native boundaries without explaining why. Traditional sacred sites must be honored. Indigenous land management practices should be respected. Vague enough to satisfy curiosity, specific enough to discourage exploration. I installed motion sensor cameras at key approach points to the boundary, giving us early warning when someone was heading toward the Devil's Zone. In the first week alone, we intercepted 3 groups of hikers and 1 documentary crew, and I patrolled. Every day, I drove past the boundary markers, watching, waiting, making sure no one crossed. Sometimes, late at night when I was alone on patrol, I'd hear clicking sounds from beyond the markers. They knew I was there. They were watching too, making sure I kept my end of the agreement. Dr. Chen kept his word. He left Arizona, and as far as I could tell from monitoring his social media, never mentioned the Devil's Zone to anyone. His photos from the trip showed normal desert landscapes from before he crossed the boundary. The corrupted files from inside were never posted. His daughter, Emma, continued to share her father's love of photography, posting pictures of California beaches and city parks. She'd never know how close she came to losing her father, or what her voice had been used for in the darkness of the Devil's Zone. Lieutenant Yazzie told me that Chen had called him once, 3 weeks after the incident, just to say thank you and to ask a question. Do you ever stop seeing them? When you close your eyes, do you ever stop seeing those faces? Yazzie had told him the truth. No. But you learn to live with it. You carry the knowledge and it changes you, but it doesn't have to destroy you. I thought about that a lot, about carrying impossible knowledge, about the weight of secrets that could never be shared, about what it meant to stand between 2 worlds, protecting both. One evening, exactly a month after the incident, I was patrolling near the boundary at sunset when my radio crackled with that familiar static, no words, just static. I pulled over and got out of my truck, watching the boundary markers as the sun painted them orange and red. And there, just beyond the markers, barely visible in the gathering darkness, I saw one of them, standing upright, watching me. Even from 100 yards away, I could see those dark eyes reflecting the sunset. We stood like that for several minutes, neither moving. 2 sentries, each watching their side of the boundary. Then, slowly, deliberately, the creature raised one hand, not in threat, in acknowledgement, recognition, respect between 2 beings who understood the importance of what they protected. I raised my hand in return. The creature turned and melted back into the shadows beyond the boundary, gone as if it had never been there. I got back in my truck and continued my patrol, the new medicine pouch heavy at my belt, my grandmother's turquoise stone warm against my chest. Some territories don't belong to us. Some agreements must be honored, and some truths are too dangerous to speak aloud. But someone has to know. Someone has to remember. Someone has to stand at the boundary and make sure the treaty holds. That someone is me now. Treaty keeper. Boundary guardian. The man who knows what lives in the Devil's Zone and why it must remain forbidden. My name is Thomas Beggy, and this is the testimony I can never officially file. But I'm filing it anyway. Because future officers will need to know. Future treaty keepers will need to understand. And when someone eventually crosses the boundary again, because they always do, whoever goes in after them will need to know what they're walking into. Some knowledge is meant to be passed down. Some warnings must be preserved. This is mine. 6 months have passed since I crossed the boundary. In that time, I've stopped 43 people from attempting to enter the Devil's Zone. 43 lives saved because I was there to turn them back. Most were angry. Called me power tripping, accused the Navajo Nation of hiding something. One Instagram influencer with 800,000 followers tried to live stream his crossing until I arrested him. His followers watched him complain about tribal authoritarianism. None of them knew I'd just saved his life. But some understood. The ones who felt that wrongness at the boundary, who sensed they were entering territory that didn't welcome humans. Those people listened when I explained about sacred sites and cultural respect. For the truly curious, I'd mention missing 411. People who cross this boundary don't come back. We don't know exactly why. Dangerous terrain, easy to get disoriented. But the statistics are clear. Is your curiosity worth your life? Fear works better than respect, unfortunately. I've also spent these months studying the protected archive Elder Harrison gave me access to. The secret record goes back centuries. Testimonies from treaty keepers, encounters with the others, the slow evolution of our relationship. I found my grandmother's testimony from 1967. She'd crossed to save a little girl named Sarah. Her account matched mine almost exactly. The temperature drop, the clicking sounds, the underground cavern. But there was something she never told me. The creatures had offered her a choice. Save the girl and leave, or stay and learn the full truth. She'd chosen to leave. In her notes, written in shaky handwriting, I chose my family over knowledge. But someday, one of my descendants will make the other choice. I pray they're strong enough. I'd made that choice. I'd stayed, learned, and now carried that burden. In late January, 7 months after Chen, everything changed. My radio crackled with an emergency transmission from inside the Devil's Zone. A woman's voice, terrified. "Rachel Winters, photographer. Crossed yesterday. They're hunting me. Please help." She'd been in there overnight, almost unheard of. I called dispatch, reported the situation. "Thomas, you know we can't send backup in there," Lieutenant Yazzie said. "If you cross, you're alone." "I can't leave her, sir." I gathered my equipment and both medicine pouches, then crossed the boundary. The change was instant. Temperature drop, silence, that orange tint to the air. Following her last transmission coordinates, I headed deep into the rock formations. 20 minutes in, I found her boyfriend's body wedged between rocks, skin partially removed. They'd been harvesting it. The clicking sound started, surrounding me. Then, that familiar layered voice from above, "Thomas Begay." "You return." "Why?" I looked up at the creature clinging to a rock face. "A woman is lost in your territory." She meant no disrespect. "Let me take her home." "She has been here 1 full night. That is the claim period. She belongs to us now. She's ignorant, not disrespectful. Her companion ran deeper toward the sacred chamber. That cannot be forgiven. But the woman, she hid, stayed quiet, showed respect for our hunting methods. That interests us." My blood went cold. "What do you mean?" "We seek humans who understand, who can walk between worlds. We would keep her, teach her, make her a permanent liaison. You can't just take her. We can. We have before. 3 humans live in our chambers now by choice." The creature leaned forward. "But we are not cruel. If you ask, we will release her, because you have earned that favor. What's the cost?" "Debt. Someday we will call, and you will answer. You will do what we ask, as long as it serves the treaty." I thought about Elder Harrison's words. "You're a treaty keeper now." "I agree." "I'll owe you." The creature made a complex clicking sound. From a crevice, Rachel Winters emerged, stumbling, traumatized, but alive. I got her to her feet. "We're leaving. Stay close. Don't speak." The creature spoke once more. "Remember your debt, Thomas Begay. We will call. This is the price of mercy." We walked back through the Devil's Zone, clicking sounds escorting us. We crossed the boundary and Rachel collapsed, sobbing with relief. At the hospital, she asked about her boyfriend. I told her the truth. He hadn't made it. "What were those things?" she asked. "The original inhabitants. The ones who were here first. The ones we made a treaty with." I gave her Captain Nez's card. "Call this number. You'll be offered help, money, a fresh start. Take it. Some truths are too dangerous to speak openly." She did. Like Chen before her, she took the money, relocated, and kept the secret. 3 months later, the debt came due. My radio made that strange static sound. Then, "Thomas Begay. We call the debt. Come to the 3rd marker at sunset. Come alone." I arrived as twilight fell. One of them emerged from beyond the boundary. "We need your help. There are 6 armed humans in our territory who will not leave. They have maps to our sacred chamber. They seek to document us, prove our existence. This cannot be allowed. You want me to stop them?" "Yes. We could kill them, but 6 deaths would attract investigation. If a tribal officer arrests them for trespassing." The creature tilted its head. "That is justice we accept. And if we fail, then we handle it our way, and the treaty will be strained." Within hours, I had a team: Yazzie, 3 officers, and Elder Harrison. We crossed the boundary at dawn, 6 officers in tactical formation. The clicking sounds followed us, escorts making sure we stayed on mission. We found the intruders camped near the sacred chamber. Professional researchers with expensive equipment. We came in fast, weapons drawn. "This is tribal land," Yazzie said. "You're trespassing." "We're documenting ancient ruins," one protested. "There's evidence of non-human civilization." "Quiet," I said, glancing at the rocks above where they watched. "Whatever you found is protected. You need to leave. Now." We arrested them, confiscated their equipment, made sure the legal consequences were severe. Their footage would be suppressed, their findings dismissed. The treaty held. The secret remained. Both peoples continued their coexistence. As I stood at the boundary that evening, Elder Harrison joined me. "You did well, Thomas. Your grandmother would be proud. How many more times will I have to do this?" "As many as needed. That's what it means to be a treaty keeper. Your grandmother carried this burden. Now you do. I'm writing this in 2024, 1 year after I first crossed. In that year, I've made 6 more crossings. I've brought out 4 people alive. 2 I couldn't save." Dr. Chen kept his word. Never returned, never spoke publicly, but he sent me a letter. "I think about the Devil's Zone every day. Sometimes I wonder if I should have stayed. But then I look at my daughter, and I know I made the right choice. Thank you for giving me that choice." Rachel Winters also stayed silent. She calls every few months just to talk to someone who understands. "The nightmares never stop," she says, "but they get easier." As for me, I continue my patrols, continue to stop people from crossing, continue to maintain the boundary, and sometimes, late at night, I hear them clicking beyond the markers, not in threat, in acknowledgement. We coexist, uneasily, but we coexist. Last month, Elder Harrison passed away at 92. At his funeral, his granddaughter gave me his journal. Decades of testimony from treaty keepers going back 4 generations. His final entry was addressed to me. Thomas, the treaty isn't just about fear and boundaries. It's about respect between peoples who share land. The others aren't our enemies. They're our oldest neighbors. Your generation can transform this relationship from fear-based separation toward actual partnership. That's my hope for the future. Make it yours too. I've made that my mission. I still patrol, still stop crossings, still maintain the treaty. But now when I give talks about respecting boundaries, I teach it's not just about fear. It's about honoring other people's space. I don't tell them about the creatures, the underground civilization, the harvest of voices. They're not ready. But I teach respect. I teach that indigenous warnings come from real experience. That forbidden doesn't mean superstitious. It means boundary we must honor. And late at night, I leave offerings at the markers. Tobacco, cornmeal, sacred herbs. The way we honor neighbors. Sometimes I find return gifts. Carved stones, braided grasses, once a perfectly preserved feather from deep caves where such things don't naturally exist. We're building something. Slowly, across a 1,000-year-old boundary. Not friendship. Our peoples are too different. But understanding, mutual respect, recognition of shared existence. The Devil's Zone remains closed. The boundaries remain marked. The warnings stay in place. But now I understand they're not prison walls keeping monsters contained. They're respectful borders between sovereign peoples. My name is Thomas Begay. I'm 38 years old, a Navajo Nation police officer and a treaty keeper in a tradition stretching back centuries. This has been my testimony for future generations. To whoever reads this, honor the boundaries. Respect the treaty, protect both peoples. The others aren't monsters. They're different people who were here first. Some territories don't belong to us, but that doesn't mean we can't be good neighbors. Walk in beauty. Hojo Jinasha.